$3.2 trillion. That's trillion with a T. That's how much the states are expected to spend on your tax dollars in the most recent fiscal year for state government operations. The National Association of State Budget Officers reports out that some states still sorting out how to spend your money for the coming fiscal year. Welcome back to the States. I'm Greg Bishop. Now, state budget situations, they can shift rapidly in late June and early July. That's because several states still have yet to button things up heading into that new fiscal year and how they're going to spend your tax dollars. Some are way late on approving spending plans. Now, roughly half of the United States has enacted fiscal year 27 budgets, but others are in the process of finalizing those budgets, either operating on continued resolutions and the prior year funding authority, or they're actually heading into late action or special sessions around that July 1st start for the new fiscal year for most states. Some states do a budget every year. Other states do a budget every other year. It encompasses 2 full years. But most of the country, 46 states, they begin their fiscal year 27 budgets July 1st. So that's coming up in just a couple of days. Texas is an outlier. They begin their budget September 1st. Alabama and Michigan, they begin their budgets October 1st. 27 states so far, so more than half the country already enacting those budgets, including many that have passed their biannual budgets. Now, which states are spending the most of your tax dollars? Something you have to consider in the ongoing reporting of state budgets is they don't just spend state taxpayer dollars. They also spend a substantial amount of federal taxpayer dollars that is passed through state agencies to go to certain types of spending priorities. Now, California clearly has the largest state budget. They're looking at $452 billion in just state funds and general revenue funds. Now, how much is coming from the federal government? Well, about $149 billion. So that means state funds and state taxpayers footing $298 billion. That's just from the most recent fiscal year. Now, California, again, their total spending, $452 billion. Legislators, they are set to take a final budget vote sometime today or tomorrow because that budget year is set to begin. State Senator David Tangipa, he talked about the state's spending and some looking to go further into debt to focus on certain types of priorities. Here he is.
And I too rise in opposition to this bill, mainly because, as I have continuously beat this drum, we have a record budget and record revenue. Why do we need to borrow money? If we wanted to appropriate money right now to take care of our veterans, to make affordable housing, you would do so in a record budget.
New York, another state with large dollar numbers of your tax money being spent, $234 billion. Of that total taxpayer spend, $134 billion is coming from state funds, $94 billion coming from federal taxpayers to New York coffers. Texas also has a pretty large spending plan, $144 billion, $93 billion of that coming from state taxpayers in Texas, but federal taxpayers giving Texas $50 billion for their state appropriations. Florida, another big spender, $130 billion. $81 billion from Florida state taxpayers, and the federal government's taxpayers spending $46 billion in Florida. Illinois, another big budget with $139 billion total spent. And that state taxpayer funds, about $112 billion, and federal taxpayer funds, about $24 billion. Pennsylvania spent $119 billion in fiscal year 24. The state's been tardy on passing a budget on time. It's actually happened the last 3 years that they've been late in approving a budget. When they don't approve a budget, states typically go into just continuing resolutions to spend at previous year's levels until they find some kind of resolution to continue forward with a new budget plan. But in Pennsylvania, Governor Josh Shapiro, in his most recent proposal, wants to increase spending on K-12 schools by more than $500 million. And that's a debate that is expected to continue. But in the last 3 years, the state has funneled $1 billion through a new funding formula. But there are other considerations. In the state Senate last week, Pennsylvania legislators tackled reversing tax breaks for data centers for what's expected to have a sizable impact on Pennsylvania's state budget.
By eliminating this exemption, it will allow the Commonwealth to offset, in this particular case, the revenue losses that we will be examining here later today as it relates to the underlying bill, which talks about the gross receipts tax on electricity bills. Estimated revenues to the Commonwealth by eliminating the sales and use tax exemption for data centers would go from $168 million this fiscal year, 26-27, rise to $517 million in 2030 and 2031.
Again, last year in Pennsylvania, state leaders missed the deadline by 135 days. And as a result, billions of tax dollars and state payments were held. Numerous employees were furloughed, and counties lost millions of dollars. But the House and Senate are scheduled to return to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania for voting session today. The Center Square team reporting on Pennsylvania reports both the House and Senate, they scaled back their voting day schedules between Thursday and tomorrow, the final day of the fiscal year, and the deadline to produce a new state budget. Elsewhere in the country, in Virginia, they spent a total $84 billion in fiscal year 2024. How much is coming from the feds? $23.4 billion. Now, Governor Abigail Spanberger, she recently proposed 14 amendments to Virginia's budget, including amendments impacting home care worker raises, new data center water requirements, firefighter cancer screening funding, and a 1-year delay of one firearm provision. You can read the latest from Virginia with the Center Square reporter Charlene Guerrera's reports at thecentersquare.com. And in Michigan, which spent $85.9 billion in fiscal year 2024, $33 billion coming from federal taxpayers, their deadline nears for a new spending plan. Michigan State Senator Mallory McMorrow, she discussed different types of budget priorities she says are meant to protect Michiganders from the Trump administration.
Protecting our rights and lowering costs are not only both possible, but essential. Your government works for you. Your tax dollars are yours. And the right to vote is not a bargaining chip. It is not something that a president gets to dangle over your head until you give him what he wants. The people of Michigan are not pawns in this game. They are taxpayers.
Now, Elise Apel, the Center Square reporter, she'll have an update out of Michigan, so be sure to get the latest at thecentersquare.com. And in North Carolina, the state was operating under automatic continuation of prior funding levels. The Center Square managing editor Alan Wooten reporting General Assembly leaders meeting to discuss the budget for the coming week after most all other lawmakers retreated for home over the weekend and voting was done. North Carolina's 2-year spending plan is to be enacted July 1st of last year, and it remains elusive amid squabbling about what are the priorities. By states with the largest share of their budgets coming from federal taxpayers, Louisiana gets nearly 50% of its spending plan from federal taxpayers. Mississippi gets about 45% of its budgets from federal taxpayers. And on the other end of the spectrum, Wyoming and Illinois, they get the lowest amount of federal funds in the percentage of their spending plan at about 18%. A lot of this money is going to fund things like Medicaid, K-12 education, higher education, transportation, corrections, and so much more. Total spending overall from your tax dollars for state governments, 5.2% up in 2024 and up 5.7% in 2025.